All right, folks, welcome into the latest edition of the Last Word on Sports Media Daily here on the podcast feed. I am the somewhat lucid host, TJ Rives. We've got a special, I don't know how we term this, not only the daily, but this is like the pregame, the build-up to the full podcast. And I'm going to welcome Mike Gill in as we do this live on a Monday afternoon. So typically you and I like to do the news of the day, the info, a couple of quick takes Monday through Friday on this feed. But you and I have got a lot to say, and we're going to say a little of it today and then a lot more tomorrow on the huge news that is coming off the weekend as it relates to the NBA show, the pre and post game show inside the NBA, and how it has essentially been traded, Mike Gill,
yes.
like for sports teams to trade players and picks. They've traded inside the NBA to Disney to use it on their ABC game broadcast. So welcome in Mike Gill of the Mike Gill Show in the greater Philadelphia market with ESPN 97.3 in Atlantic City. Good to have you here. And I have to say, when this broke over the weekend, and kudos to Joe Flint, who we've had on this podcast, Mike Gill from the Wall Street Journal. He's the one that broke the story. He had it in print first. He had it cold with what was going to happen, that they were essentially trading this, and in return, in the trade, that Warner Brothers Discovery, Turner Sports, is going to get more Big 12 football and basketball games to show as part of the trade. So what is your reaction now that all of this has come out, that Ernie Johnson, Kenny Smith, Charles Barkley, and Shaq will be doing their pregame show, not this season, but starting next season, for Disney and ABC's biggest games, including the playoffs and the NBA Finals, Mike Gill?
All right, so this is unbelievable. This is an awesome, I feel like Jimmy Pitaro, ESPN, what a great way to kind of facilitate this. I think this is the best of every world. Inside the NBA stays, TNT produces it. So you don't have to worry about the, people who said, oh, they're going to ESPN it up, or you're going to get Stephen A. Smith thrown in there, and maybe, Brian Windhorst. Not that they're bad, but Inside the NBA is unique to itself with the characters it has and the way that it's produced. From what I understand, it's going to stay in the Atlanta studios. It's going to be produced by all TNT people, so the look and feel of the show will stay the same. In return, you're going to get, I know on the screen it says 12 Big 12 games. That's a mistype. It's 13 Big 12 football games.
Correct.
And 15 Big 12 basketball games.
Annually that they now get.
Well, it's a 6-year deal. It's a 6-year deal. And no cash is being changed here. We get inside the NBA. You get those football games. Warner Brothers needed tonnage. They needed to get more games on their network because they lost the NBA. So ESPN said, look, you're not going to win this battle with the NBA in this lawsuit. Drop the lawsuit. We'll take inside the NBA. You guys produce it. And in exchange, we will fill your schedule that you're losing NBA games with these Big 12 games. I think it's great. We get inside the NBA, and it doesn't get touched. It doesn't turn into a ESPN product. It's a TNT product airing on ESPN television. I think it's great.
We will extend our comments and thoughts again on the full podcast that is out on Tuesday. But suffice to say, this is not the first of these kind of trades. For example, when Al Michaels, I'll detail it more on Tuesday. I'm teasing ahead. When Al Michaels was still under contract for Disney, in fact, I think he had re-upped to do Monday Night Football, he suddenly decided he wanted to be on Sunday Night Football on NBC. And Mike Gill, they traded him to NBC in exchange for more access to Ryder Cup coverage and highlights on ESPN for Sports Center.
Some bunny.
And also
cartoon bunny, Disney character.
The cartoon Disney character that Universal now had that Disney wanted back. They wanted the rights back to like the original incarnation of Mickey Mouse, Steamboat Willie, and the cartoon bunny and whatever else. And also, I think they got some rights to do more Olympic coverage because NBC Universal had it. So my point is, there have been trades before involving broadcasters. It's kind of interesting. Even in the recent, Joe Buck still had a year left on his Fox Sports deal, and they let him, without even a trade, they let him out of the deal to go to ESPN Monday Night Football. So these kind of shifts have happened, and we've had to get used to the last couple of years. Joe Buck and Troy Aikman, who were on Fox for so many years, for 20 years, are now doing Monday Night Football. So I bring it back to you. We will get used to Inside the NBA being on the ABC network. And again, they released the details starting January 1 on the Saturdays and the Sundays of their NBA coverage on ABC. This will be the pregame and the postgame show. So it will take some getting used to, but that's the layout. And the ESPN NBA Countdown show will still be on their network for their games. Fascinating how all this worked out, and you're showing their Jimmy Pitaro statement about all of this. That all goes into play next NBA season,
right.
25-26 season. Pick it up there, Mike.
As TNT, they're going to have their broadcast for the rest of this year all the way to the NBA Finals. I mean, to the Western Conference Finals. ESPN and ABC have the finals as usual with Mike Breen and that crew. Who's going to call that? We don't know. But ESPN, according to the tweet from ESPN PR, they have now come out and acknowledged this. They will be the home to Inside the NBA starting next NBA season. So they will not have the show on every single NBA night, but what they will have is pregame, halftime, and postgame for the NBA Finals, the NBA Playoffs, Christmas Day, and the big NBA games on ABC television. So any game that's like a regular Wednesday night ESPN game, similar to what Turner does now. They have Adam Lefkoe, Shaq, and Jamal
Candace Parker and others.
And Jamal Crawford. They do that Tuesday night version, so it's a little different than the Inside the NBA. Inside the NBA generally goes on Thursdays. So ESPN will keep the Countdown crew together, but they will be now the quote-unquote number 2 team on ESPN.
And again, all of this being brokered with Warner Brothers dropping the lawsuit, reaching a settlement with the NBA, where they can continue to utilize NBA highlights and do coverage of the NBA on Bleacher Report, who they're aligned with, as well as their own social channels. And they also get to continue to do things with NBA TV that they have been producing and continue that relationship. This is all part of that deal. So the lawsuit is now dropped. We have resolved how Inside the NBA continues, and it's fascinating. I guess the one variable, Mike, as we go along here on the daily, is Shaquille O'Neal is not signed long-term. So I don't know if they'll bring him back. Can I confess, Charles Barkley and Kenny Smith make that show. I don't have to have Shaq there if Shaq's only there part of the time or Shaq's not there, at all. I think that Kenny Smith and Charles Barkley make that show. I really do. So,
well, Ernie, I think the fact that Ernie's
Ernie
coming over. Don't forget Ernie coming over too. And Ernie, I think, is the guy who's the point man that makes the show. As in terms of if Ernie didn't come, and if the 3 guys came in, they had to put a new host in there. The show doesn't work. Ernie is the guy who makes those guys who they are. Shaq, yes, he is not signed, but apparently he wants to come and he wants to continue doing this. Kenny Smith, I think, is also in a situation where, look, and keep this in mind, Jimmy Pitaro goes out and makes the call to TNT ahead of NBC and Prime, who need a pregame show.
Of course.
So there was a lot of talk of where this is going to end. Does NBC jump in with 2 feet and say, we are going to have the premiere, pre, post, and halftime? They get beat out. Kudos to ESPN here. I think this is a very intelligent, smart way to make this all work. Hey, here's a couple Big 12 basketball games you get in January, February, March, when you don't have the NBA now. And in the early months of the season, October, September, you get a couple football games. Now, apparently they're not the high-level Big 12, football games or whatever, but listen, they get something on their air for money exchange. It's a win-win for everybody.
Yep. Again, we'll have much more on this on the full podcast on Tuesday. I mean, we got so much to go over on the full podcast, including one of my guys, Dave Sims, is now the new radio voice of the New York Yankees to replace John Sterling. Hello. We got to talk about that.
Had that on Friday's Daily, by the way, and I told people we had Dave Sims on the Announcer Schedules podcast. So if you want to go back and listen to that, it's on this feed. On this feed, go back and hear Simsy 18-year run with the Seattle Mariners, long time
big-time broadcaster. Thrilled for him. We got to talk more about that, obviously, on Tuesday. Wild Sunday in the NFL, where the ratings should be through the roof all the way through the Sunday night game on NBC, as well as some other sports media news that's fascinating. But this is by far the biggest deal. Mike, just sum it up one more time here. I realize we're making a big deal about this. And by the way, Ernie Johnson makes history because he will be part of the college basketball Final Four and part of the NBA Finals, hosting both. I got to go back in time when CBS had the NBA games and CBS also had the NBA Finals at that time in the 1980s. I'm not sure if somebody hosted both. It might have been Brent Musburger that hosted both, but Ernie Johnson's an elite company that he's going to get to be the host for part of the Final Four, as he has been, and also be part of the NBA Finals eventually on this deal. So final thought from you here on the Daily. Anything else?
Love this whole thing. The fact that inside the NBA is not going to be going away and it's not going to change. That to me is the key, is that the TNT people are producing this 6 more years of Inside the NBA. And, I think it's a smart idea. Jimmy Pitaro should get big kudos for putting this together. And
speaking of the NCAA tournament, they've already been doing this model for over a decade, where you have Greg Gumbel, Clark Kellogg in previous years, Seth Davis sitting in a studio in New York, and a similar looking studio with Ernie Johnson, Charles Barkley, and Kenny Smith in Atlanta have been going back and forth with games on CBS or on Turner. And so they had practice with this and trading, and it looks the same, et cetera, et cetera. And now it's going to be the same, but it's just going to be on ABC.
Is Charles Barkley going to be a part of the TNT Turner college basketball? He's usually a part of the and so is Kenny, by the way.
Right.
They generally are part of the NCAA tournament. Does this deal now have Charles say, you know what? I don't need to do that anymore?
Well, but keep in mind, again, they've got the NCAA tournament games that they build up to. And so now they've been using Brian Anderson and Jim Jackson on the Turner version of the NCAA tournament. They may, I'm just saying this, speculating, they may become much bigger role players in the whole Big 12 thing, and how that morphs into it. That's another discussion for another day. But fascinating because, yeah, go ahead.
I did real quick on that. Barkley does the studio show on those NCAA tournament games, and you wonder if we start to see him kind of phase himself out, and Kenny as well. But as you said, Ernie, I imagine that this might not happen because I think their contracts are all still going to be Turner contracts.
Correct, and Turner's responsible for paying them.
Yes,
and just bear in mind here, this is a big deal in terms of this, and the lawsuit has now gone away. This lawsuit where Turner was trying to hang on to being able to televise games has essentially gone away. So they're going to have NBA TV games that they're involved with producing. But in terms of the pro basketball on Turner, after a 35-year plus relationship of either showing the Atlanta Hawks and or a game of the week and the playoffs on TNT, they're not going to have the games anymore. It's part of this broker deal. What could we get out of it? How do we work it out with the NBA? And they got some concessions on some things they want to do, and now everybody's going to move on. That's the bottom line.
By the way, I know tomorrow we have a much longer version. We'll get into deeper things here, and we might even have a guest or two to kind of talk about this throughout the week. I've reached out to some people to come talk on for the Daily later on in the week. But I did hear this little nugget that's something that maybe you can get some thoughts on for tomorrow. Thursday Night Football on Amazon Prime for the first time outdrew Monday Night Football on ESPN television. Eagles, Commanders. More viewers watched on the streaming platform than watched the Monday night game last week, which was not a good one, Miami and the Rams. So for the first time ever, Thursday Night Football on the streaming Amazon Prime.
The NFL has said for a couple of years, this is the future, and they have been forcing it down our throats to go find an app and watch it. And by the way, on the full podcast tomorrow, we have to talk about the disaster, and that's the right word, that Netflix was for the Jake Paul, Mike Tyson fight Friday night, where over 60 million, Mike Gill. In fact, the fight peaked at over 64 million accounts were watching live. That's more than anything other than the Super Bowl, kids. on a streaming service. And so now we have these Christmas Day games for the NFL on Netflix. What kind of audience are they going to get? Probably 40, 50 million accounts, maybe more, maybe as much as this boxing. So we'll talk more about that tomorrow. Another tease ahead, Mike Gill, on the problems Netflix had and what does it mean for a month from now or so, 5 weeks or so, for the Christmas Day broadcasts that are upcoming. But it just shows you these streaming outlets, they are not going away. This is going to be a big part of the future of televised sports, particularly the NFL and college football, Mike, one more time.
Yeah, the Netflix thing, though, I was out. I did not experience any outages, but I know obviously people did.
Millions and
yeah,
millions
no, listen,
and
I
millions.
saw it everywhere. This isn't news. Where I was, now I was at a bar where maybe because they got it off a DirecTV channel that they weren't having the problems, but I certainly saw it all. The NFL has to be like, are you kidding me?
Right.
They just announced Beyonce is going to be the halftime act, so that's going to be stuffing more people in there.
Oh, my God. Yes.
It is setting up for – and by the way, I don't know about you. I know you do the boxing show with Dan.
Yep.
I thought, Morrow's great. I don't think they did a very good job.
My colleague Dan Rayfield destroyed Netflix for the streaming problem and destroyed them. He tempered it for the quality of the broadcast and too many people on it. So we'll debate that more tomorrow. Yeah,
I was going to say, Morrow's is very good at what he does. The rest of the crew had no business being. By the way, Roy Jones Jr. was unrecognizable. I did not even recognize Roy Jones Jr. Rosie Perez being a part of the broadcast. Cedric the Entertainer. I mean, they had no CG on the screen. If you were just watching, I had no idea who this guy was. Kate Scott. I mean, I don't know what her role was.
You've whetted our appetite for the longer version of this tomorrow. But yeah, that's going to be another subject that we have, which was Netflix and the mess they had. So we did well with the daily. Again, one more time in recapping it, the biggest news announced today by both ESPN, by Turner, that the Inside the NBA show will now become an ABC Disney pregame, halftime, and postgame all the way through the end run of the regular season of their big games and the playoffs and the NBA Finals. And that is a 6-year deal, by the way, that it will continue on with Ernie Johnson, Kenny Smith, Charles Barkley, maybe probably Shaq also as part of that. That's the big deal, Mike, that we were talking about today on the day.
Yeah, and the only thing I'm interested to see, I know they're not going to be on as much as they're on TNT every Thursday night. This looks like it's going to be big ABC games, conference finals, playoffs, Christmas Day. But are they going to get the freedom to just kind of go late into the night without any programming behind them? ABC might say, hey, we got to get to our late local news on some of these nights. Who knows? I think that's going to be something.
What do you and I agree on? Live sports is king right now. And if you get, and primarily this is going to be on Saturday and Sunday. If you get a massively interesting NBA game, why are you going to go to like Rescue 911 or not Rescue 911, 911 whatever? Or
I have no idea what's on ABC television.
Any of these other shows on ABC television. Why would you do that? So that's another discussion for another day. We'll see.
Yeah. So looking forward to more tomorrow and the Netflix stuff. There's so many other things, by the way, that are out there. The ratings should be coming out for the games tomorrow. By the way, I had this on the daily on Friday. Happened to get this nugget. No Romo and Nance this week. The schedule's so bad, CBS said, take the week off.
Well, right, because they're going to work them double for Thanksgiving.
They're going to do double, but I don't think that's happened in the past. I think they looked at Chiefs, Panthers, and said, you know what? We'll take this week off.
Very good. Mike Gill, we're always here Monday through Friday with the daily full podcast. Tomorrow we're looking at guests, etc., about this situation with the NBA and the resolving of the lawsuit with Warner Brothers Discovery and how did it work out with this trade. Great stuff. Mike Gill, thank you, brother. Have a great rest of the day.
All right, everybody, download, like, rate, review, and subscribe.
Yep. Find us on the Last Word on Sports Media podcast feed. More Tuesday.